You know, it's wonderful to have so many young people, little bitties here today, as we consider this important question about how do we live knowing we will die, because they are often our best teachers. So today we reflect on that question. It's the third in our series. The first two questions were, who am I and what do I love? Now, how shall I live knowing I will die? This question is perhaps the most anxiety-producing for people in our culture. We're encouraged to explore who we are and what we love, but in our culture, we tend to hide death. Therefore, we're not allowed to learn the art of a good death from our elders. In reflecting on our question, how shall I live knowing I will die? What if, as we have seen in movie after movie, we really could stop at the moment of our death to turn back and look at the events of our lives, to truly see what was most meaningful to others about the time and space we take up here on earth. I remember an elder in the Athens congregation said, I really want to have my memorial service before I die. If we could do that, then perhaps we might understand how living prepares us for dying. Yet, to be realistic, our attention to life drifts and we forget to notice our days as they go by. One of the most powerful sort of sections of writing was brought to my attention when in high school I studied Thornton Wilder's Our Town. I think many of us have read that, but the last act of the play has stayed with me all these years because it reminds me to notice the beauty in the ordinary and to live fully. So in the last act of Our Town, Emily, the main character, enters the cemetery having died in childbirth. She asks to go back to her life, and though discouraged by other occupants of Cemetery Hill, she does return. She reflects on her precious life and says, let's really look at one another. I can't go on. It goes so fast we don't have time to look at one another. I didn't realize. So all that, meaning life, was going on and we never noticed. Take me back up the hill to my grave. But first, wait. One more look. Goodbye. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners, Mama and Papa. Goodbye to clocks ticking and Mama's sunflowers and food and coffee and new our dresses and hot baths and sleeping and waking. Oh, Earth, you are too wonderful for anyone to realize you. Do human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute? And the stage manager replies, no. The saints and poets, maybe they do some. Perhaps the most important thing that we can do is to pay attention and to be grateful for every moment. In this way, we live our lives gathering the essence of love and beauty around us as we live, thereby preparing us for death. And so we need to learn how to live deliberately with meaning, love, and compassion. So, as I begin, a message from our sponsor. If you thought I was going to give you answers today, sorry. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and we believe that each of us has a unique journey in life to find the answers to life's most pressing questions. And I also want to say that often our fear of death has more to do with our fear of suffering than with death itself. So I invite us to walk this journey of discovery together as we support one another to make sense and to make peace out of life's big questions. The essence of much of sacred writing is to teach us how to live, and in so doing, to teach us how to die. The moral stories that guide us are a way to help us live in such a way that when we come to the end of our lives, we can do so with little regret, having made amends or offered ourselves compassion for our misdeeds. They remind us of our responsibility to leave a legacy for those who will come after us. And they teach us that there is peace to be found as we leave this life to enter the great mystery. Of course, UUs claim a wide range of beliefs about what happens when we die, from a belief that when we die, that's it, we return to the earth. Or, as my daughter said in high school, and the worms eat us. That was her big thing. To a belief that there is some soul energy that lives on and resides in an eternal sacred unity, or that we believe in reincarnation. We can find the whole spectrum in our congregation. And yet, we're rather unified in our belief that we make heaven on earth for ourselves and those around us. Throughout human history, religions and cultures have developed wide-ranging beliefs about life and death. These stories are used as reminders and teaching prompts over and over, so that we learn that we need to live our lives as if each moment were precious and perhaps our last. I rediscovered one such teaching story a couple of weeks ago when I found a quote from a Persian allegory written in the 12th century by a Sufi poet entitled The Conference of the Birds, or Speech of the Birds. The poem, which is more than 4,500 lines. I haven't made it through the whole thing yet. It's intended to teach about the lessons or hurdles that each human being needs to cross to understand how to live, so that we may die with peace and enlightenment. I'm not sure if there's one of those what are the short prompts for college students? Cliff Notes. I'm not sure if there's a Cliff Notes on this one. My interest in the Conference of the Birds was sparked by a quote I found about living in preparation for death. And it's esoteric, but meaningful to me, and y'all have to listen to it. In reflecting on this, one must remember that the ultimate goal for Sufis is union with the sacred God, sacred unity, however you want to name that. So, from the Conference of the Birds, in the dead of night, a Sufi began to weep. He said, "This world is like a closed coffin in which we are shut, and in which, through our ignorance, we spend our lives in folly and desolation. When death comes to open the lid of the coffin, each one who has wings will fly off to eternity. But those without will remain locked in the coffin. So, my friends, before the lid of this coffin is taken off, do all you can to become a bird to the way of God. Do all you can to develop your wings and your feathers." Sounds a little bit like Spirit of Life, and our need for roots and wings. So this poem is a reminder that we humans, symbolized by birds, are called to pay attention to our lives when we develop the wings and feathers we need as we leave this life. We may leave it into the embrace of the great mystery. So 800 years ago, this teacher told this story to his students so they could learn how to live in a way that would prepare them for death and whatever lies beyond. Because, let's face it, it's all a guess. No matter how much religious communities tell you you're either going to go to heaven or burn in hell, it's going to be a surprise. In this moral tale, the birds of the world gather to decide who will be their sovereign. The hoopie, the wisest of birds, suggests that they search for the legendary Simorg. This is not Lord of the Rings, folks. They search for him, and the Simorg will be able to tell them who should be their sovereign. The hoopie then leads the birds across 7 valleys. As they cross each of the valleys, there's a challenge that represents a human fault or weakness. And each of the faults keeps us from attaining enlightenment. So the valleys, the valley of the quest, where the wayfarer begins by casting aside all dogma, belief, and unbelief. Or pay attention to how your beliefs, dogmas, and unbelief affect your life journey and keep you from evolving your beliefs and actions. 2 is the valley of love, where reason is abandoned for the sake of love. I'll bet some of us in here have been to that valley before. Are our lives focused on the highest for all so that we manifest love in all we do? The valley of knowledge, where worldly knowledge becomes utterly useless. Can we step aside from ego that convinces us that what we do out of greed or ego is selfless? The valley of detachment, where all desires and attachments to the world are given up. Here is what is assumed to be reality vanishes. Is our life focused on wants and attachments to things, even people, who do not embody the good and the true? The valley of unity, where the wayfarer realizes that everything is connected and that the beloved, which is what the Sufis call ultimate reality, is beyond everything, including harmony, multiplicity, and eternity. Can we live in trust that everything is connected and we are all part of the beloved? The 6th valley is the valley of wonderment, where, entranced by the beauty of the sacred, the wayfarer becomes perplexed and, steeped in awe, finds that she or he has never known or understood anything. I think the older we get, we understand that one more. Can we, with humility, release our ego so that we can learn that we don't know? And last, the valley of poverty and annihilation, where the self disappears into the universe and the wayfarer becomes timeless, existing in both the past and the future. We are part of all. Therefore, we can trust. We can trust that when we leave, we release our essence into the mystery, the sacred unity of all. In the end, not all the birds arrive at the end of the journey. Some lack courage to go on. Others choose not to conquer their frailties. Only those who are dedicated with integrity were able to free themselves of the draw of each of the valley's frailties. And those are the birds that achieved enlightenment. So each of us has our own journey. It's up to us if we make it the whole way, or if we stop and spend some time, much of our lives, with one of the frailties that maybe our souls work to do. Soleil Wolpe, in her modern translation of this work, writes, "The parables in this book trigger memories deep inside us all. The stories inhabit the imagination, and slowly over time their wisdom trickles down into the heart. And of course, we are the birds in the story. All of us have our own ideas and ideals, our own fears and anxieties, as we hold on to our own version of the truth. Like the birds of the story, we may take flight together, but the journey itself will be different for each of us. Attar tells us that truth is not static and that we each tread a path according to our own capacity. Truth evolves as we evolve, as we're able to understand more. Those who are trapped within their own dogma, clinging to hardened beliefs or faith, are deprived the journey toward the unfathomable divine, which Attar calls the great ocean. So, if we move through the challenges that are part of our own lives, if we envision the immensity of the divine ocean, the pattern of the present world and the future world dissolve, as you realize that the individual self does not really exist, the drop that is us becomes part of the great ocean where we reside forever in peace. So, in other words, the short version, shorter than 4,500 lines. You know, we need to commit ourselves to understanding and living out the essence of unity and love, so that when our time comes, we will truly go in peace from this life. Of course, that's easier said than done. We're all frail. We lose focus and attention on what is most important to us. Because we're not enlightened beings, we probably are going to have some regrets that we carry with us at the end of our lives. We might think our lives didn't unfold the way we'd planned them. We didn't go to medical school or climb Everest or have children or win a Pulitzer. We haven't become the people we imagined, and we feel regret. Yet, you know, regret can be a dangerous thing. It can take us away from fully living the life that we have because we want a life that's not ours. Do we make mistakes and have regrets about wrong choices? Certainly. None of us is perfect. We need to cut ourselves some slack and offer ourselves forgiveness as we learn to live more honest and compassionate lives. We need to live in trust that if we live full, loving lives, in the end, all will be well. What we need to ask ourselves, in the words of Mary Oliver, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? One year, I offered the invocation at the University of Georgia graduation, and a young woman who was speaking at the graduation, framed her comments about the dash on one's tombstone. You may have heard this imagery before. We have the date of our birth and the date of our death, and there's that little dash in between. That's the whole of our lives, that little dash. It encompasses our mortal existence. It's so easy when we think about, what does that little dash mean? Are we forgetting what's most important in our lives? The question for each of us is, how will we live within the space between our birth and our death? Think just a moment of the people you've known, the people you really try to emulate. Imagine their lives as that little dash between their beginning on the earth and when they left. What is it about them that makes us want to be like them? So let's just think about that for a moment. Picture that person in your mind's eye. Their picture may just pop right up there. How might you take their values, the truth of their life, and bring it into who you want to be? How do our acts and thoughts embody that person's highest ideals, and how have we evolved from what we learned from them? Of course, the picture that always pops in my mind is a picture of my grandfather, who was truly a good man. Integrity, kindness, honor, and morality were paramount in his life. He wasn't in Hollywood. He wasn't a sports star. He lived a life that was quite inconsequential to a society that often professes that the one with the most toys when they die is the one that wins. My grandfather didn't have much education. I don't even know how literate he was. He worked hard. People loved and respected him. In the last years of his life, he always had a horse or two or three and loved teaching children how to ride them. He would take young people under his wing, kids who were beginning to get in trouble, and he kept them out of trouble. When he died, the children in the community who loved to ride and loved to be in his presence took up a collection to buy books about horses for the library in my hometown. That was a fitting memorial gift. Poor in the world's riches and rich in a life well lived. He lived in a way that prepared him for a good death. He lived well and he died well. What was it that you thought of your special person? You know, even in our larger society, there are people who have great wisdom about how to live and prepare for death. And yesterday, I read an interview with George Takei in The Guardian. And, I think as we age, often our sense of humor gets better. So there are two answers to questions that he gave that I'd like to share with you. One is humorous and about the angst of getting older in life. And one, I think, is a pretty wise response. The humorous response to the reality of aging, if we're blessed enough to live to a ripe old age. He was asked the question, what do you dislike most about your appearance? He said, I've done 6 marathons, But gravity has been working on my body for 82 years and pulled my pectoral muscles down. They are now around my waistline. Not standard wisdom, but I think pretty darn good about caring for yourself and loving yourself. Then he was asked, what's at the top of your bucket list? He said, I don't believe in bucket lists. When one is elderly, you get too tired. You can't walk that far or play that hard. I believe in enriching yourself as you are living life. Enrich yourself as you live your life with friendship, with experiences, with learning, with challenge. In this way, we live day by day and year by year, and we reduce the likelihood that we will have regrets. And we are also building a legacy that will live on. Perhaps what we need to consider as we prepare for our own deaths is live so that you have no regrets and leave a legacy for your loved ones that your loved ones can continue. And if you're feeling lost or anxious, remember that there are folks around you. There's this community here. And together we support one another as we live into the question of how shall we live knowing that we will die. Our UU forebear, William Henry Channing, wrote of the legacy he wished to leave behind after his death. And let's turn to 484. I have several friends who have this on their office walls. So this is what he wanted to be his legacy and how he wanted to live his life. And let's just read this together. 484. To live content with small means, to seek elegance rather than luxury, and refinement rather than fashion, to be worthy, not respectable, and wealthy, not rich, to study hard, think quietly, talk gently, act frankly, to listen to stars and birds, to babes and sages with open heart, to bear all cheerfully, do all bravely, await occasions, hurry never, to let the spiritual, unbidden, and unconscious grow up through the common. This is to be my sip. As we live with integrity and intention, may we find peace that when our time comes for us to leave this life, we will leave behind a symphony. In this way, we will be living the answer to the question, how shall I live knowing I will die? And may we leave this place, this life, with trust and hope that all we have given to others and this world will be a living legacy.